Welcome back to Imperfectly Permaculture. I am Destiny, and I am coming to you today from USDA Growing Zone 4B in western Maine. It's mid-August, and that means that our wild cherries are ripening. So I'm going to show you today what our wild cherry species look like, and we'll show you how we turn our foraged cherries into fruit leather. So let's get started. There are two species of wild cherry that we forage in our area. The first is Prunus virginiana, also known as chokecherry, and the other is Prunus serotina, also known as black cherry. These two wild cherries produce very similar looking fruits and are distinguished by their leaf shape and bark shape primarily. The fruits grow in clusters along a single stem. I think of them as similar to a bunch of grapes in that regard. And the fruits, when ripe, will be a dark red, sometimes verging on black in coloration, and will remove from the central stem fairly easily. The fruit are rather small, much smaller than the cherries you purchase in the store. And inside, like store cherries or other stone fruit, is a single small pit. If you pick a berry and it has multiple seeds inside, it is not a wild cherry. Other ways that you may confirm your ID for these is if you scrape a little bit of bark from a branch. It should have a faintly almond-like aroma, like marzipan perhaps. Now, this is a good time to share a few notes related to foraging. The first is you should only forage when you are confident in your identification skills. That means taking the time to educate yourself on how to properly ID the plant or fungus that you're foraging. That means learning about how to use taxonomic keys, guidebooks. That means knowing how to walk away when you think you found something really great, but you just aren't sure. Being excited about a great find is not worth risking your health or your life over. There are apps that people use which can be helpful tools for learning how to ID items for forage, but you should never rely on an app for your identification. Use it as a tool to provide you suggestions, but always confirm that it's a good ID. The same thing goes with using Facebook groups for identification. Don't trust people online that you have never met with your health or your life. Ask them for suggestions, ask them for resources. I do sometimes share photos in my local foraging groups. for assistance with identification. I'm looking for people to give me ideas because I am stumped. And then I research the plants that they suggest as possible IDs. I never just trust whoever comments back to me. So make sure that you take the time, invest the time to learn if you really want to do foraging. It's become kind of hip and trendy lately, and I see a lot of people making potentially dangerous mistakes. Next is more related to the ethics of foraging. So part of knowing the plants that you're foraging is knowing their status in your area. Are you foraging something that is abundant or something that is struggling? And you won't know that just by looking in the area that you're standing in that moment. So knowing about like what plants are abundant, what plants are at risk, what plants are invasive in your area. Foraging invasives is a great way to help control them from spreading and crowding out your native plants that local fauna rely on for food. Knowing how much is okay to harvest. So for something like wild cherries, which are abundant and tend to be an early transitional species, which means that they're sort of a pioneer in areas around here that are reforesting. That means there's a lot of them, and you can harvest a fair amount. Another ethical issue is making sure that you have permission to forage where you are. Private lands are probably fairly obvious to people that you need to have landowner permission before harvesting from them. But some public lands also have restrictions on foraging, and that's to preserve habitat and preserve food sources for the local wildlife. So take the time to read about the rules and regulations in the area where you may be foraging to be sure that you are being a good and responsible neighbor and citizen. Now back to the wild cherries that we've been foraging. My husband and daughter enjoy eating them fresh off the trees as a snack, but for me, they're a bit too astringent. I don't particularly enjoy them fresh, but I do enjoy them when they've been processed, for example, into jam, or, as I'll show you today, into fruit leather. Fruit leather is a great way to process and preserve some of your fruits for longer, and especially when you don't feel like busting out the canning supplies and dealing with that whole process, making fruit leather can be a lot faster. So let's see how we do that. When we bring the cherries home, we start by processing them through a food mill. This removes the pits from them and makes them easier to use. Because they're so small, a cherry pitter really doesn't work. The food mill pushes the fruit pulp out and keeps the skins and pits separate, and you end up with a puree like this. We take the puree then and spread it onto a jerky tray in our food dehydrator. And running it overnight on the jerky setting creates this fruit leather, which we ate before I was able to get a finished photo of it. As you can see, it's a popular treat in our house. Thank you for watching today. I will be back again soon with more information about my garden and food forest, about resilience skills, or foraging. Please remember to like and subscribe for more content, and leave comments for me. I love hearing from you. Take care.